I know a single mother who has, I think, close to a 3-year-old, could be on the 2-year-old side, but it's close enough, who's kind of the age where potty training and teeth coming through, and those of you who have children that age know exactly the age I'm talking about. She describes how she potty trained him, and she just lovingly and firmly accomplished that pretty smoothly. Many parents have just a terrible time with potty training. Actually, they have a terrible time with their children, full stop, just all the time. But she just loved and taught him. She just taught him like right out of the parenting book. So the terrible twos weren't even a big deal, and they don't have to be. I really don't like that phrase. Oh, well, it's just the terrible twos. No, your kid's trying to get your attention, and we're not loving and teaching them enough. The terrible twos are not inevitable, just like the terrible teenage years, because we've been doing this long enough now that there are children who have been raised from birth with unconditional love, and they don't have these problems. We treat them like they're inevitable, just like we mistakenly call alcoholism a disease. No, it's a response to pain. And so are all the other unproductive behaviors, including the terrible twos. Anyway, back to her. So she's been consistent with loving and teaching, including occasionally using consequences when loving and teaching repeatedly doesn't work. That's the whole purpose of consequences. We got it. He's 3 years old and he's brilliant. Responds to being loved, responds to being taught. Kids like being loved and taught. And then he got a nasty virus, just infected everything in his head, and snot running out of his nose, and horrible looking color, and you know how kids get. Kid got miserable. She got the same nasty virus, and it just knocked her down like a chainsaw fells a tree. And it had a similar effect on him. So here are two sick people, sick parent, sick kid, and she noticed that his behavior began to change. Well, yeah, take any adult and fly them across the Atlantic, for example, and then they have to be there for a meeting and they're up for 24 hours. Yeah, they tend to get a little cranky too. Anything that can drain us changes our behavior. Tiredness, being sick, emotional stress, can be a lot of things. Triggers from the past that remind us of some horrible thing when we were a kid. The thing from our childhood we don't even remember. So sometimes our PTSD can be triggered by blue, pick a thing, broccoli. Sometimes we just have a bad day. Well, so do kids. Sickness, exhaustion, travel, unfamiliar environments. He was experiencing all of those while he was sick. And so guess what? His behavior changed. Yeah. So she asked, what do I do? You keep loving and teaching. It's remarkably consistent. And you still do consequences, and you do all of this as much as he can take. You have to adapt when a kid is sick. It's not the same. When a kid is sick and flying in an airplane, and their ears get pressure built up and they start screaming, you can't treat them like they're healthy, because they're not. You have to be more tolerant, sometimes more lenient. This is a potential trap. Sometimes we think being more loving means always letting them get away with unproductive behaviors when they're sick. No, when they're sick, they still don't get to throw food from the table onto the floor. They still have to clean it up. Oh, they're going to hate it more. It's going to take longer, but they still don't get to do that. But you can be more lenient about some things. Say you have an hour of television time per day. I'm just making this up. I don't care what your schedule is. And when the kid is sick, they just want to sit there like a blob in front of the television. And it's almost the only thing they can do without making them cry. Well, I would suggest increasing the television time. In fact, possibly your own. They just can't learn when they're distracted that much. And when we're distracted that much, you, the mother, have the same illness, you don't love and teach as well. You can't be as giving. You're just not as full when you're sick. So you're both, well, impaired, handicapped in a way. Lighten up, but don't lighten up all the way. She asked about what to do while he was teething. So he's right at the end of this virus, and he's getting cranky because teeth, molars are erupting. Same thing. You adapt. People, kids and adults, who are sick, tired, and distracted are not themselves. It's really simple. They love less well. They feel loved less easily. They learn when you teach them less well. You don't send kids to school when they're sick, partly because they'll infect other kids. But let's just say a kid has a toothache. You send a kid to school because he's not going to learn anything. There was a pediatrician who did an entire book, actually, where he compared the symptoms of ADD, and ADHD, whichever you choose to use, compared to kids who are just in pain, like have a toothache, like have an emotional upset at home. They're the same set of symptoms. When kids are distracted by pain or whatever, they don't learn as well. So you might want to slacken the pace a little bit because of his capacity to learn. For those of you who are thinking, I don't have a 2 or 3-year-old child, if you're an employer, all these rules are the same. If you have a spouse, the rules are the same. You wouldn't try to push your spouse to hurry his or her pace to accomplish the thing while they're sick. So, how much do you slacken the pace? Be sensitive. Watch the effect of what you do. If he's sick, he'll be more resistant to changing his behavior, or like cleaning up his mess, for example. He just will be. So you don't back off every time he's resistant, because if you do, he won't learn anything, and he'll learn that children can unlearn a pattern in a big hurry. If you slacken off and you don't make them clean up their mess, for example, 10 times in a row, they'll think that's the new rule. And then when they're not sick, then they're going to fight you like crazy because, you changed the rules again. She says this, he doesn't complain of pain, though. So is his behavior due to pain? Yeah, almost certainly. He's teething. He has this low-grade discomfort. He doesn't identify it as pain. He doesn't realize it. And adults often don't either. Same with emotional pain. Either we've lived with it all of our lives, or it just sneaks up on us like a form of PTSD. Many times. There's been a day where I've just felt off. And if somebody asks me, so what's wrong? Does it hurt anywhere? No. Is your head stuffy and your nose running? No, but I feel off. And it's not till the next day that I get all the symptoms of a cold, and now I realize what it was. I was just experiencing viremia, viruses proliferating and spilling into the bloodstream by the millions. I was feeling off, but not sick. Same with a kid. Low-grade teething, not pain, but they are in pain, and it's affecting them. We don't see it. We don't see their pain, we don't see our pain, but it is affecting us. So you lighten up. When I'm having just a bad day for no reason, I lighten up in interacting with people. I don't schedule as many phone calls with people. We are often not aware that we're in pain, even though we're being affected by it. That's kind of the golden rule I'm giving you here. So you adapt. You'll do fine. I'm not going to give you specifics for every little reaction, because just knowing this, you will adapt and you'll do fine. New subject. From a woman who's been practicing real love for a couple of years, but she can't get over the hurdle, seemingly, not yet, of both people-pleasing and victimhood. And they really go together. They sound like different things. Pleasing people and being victimized by them. No, they go together just perfectly. People pleasers are not actually serving others. See, it doesn't say people serving. We refer to people pleasing. And why did they do it? They please other people, not for the benefit of other people, although there may be some element of that in there. I'm not going to discount that. But they're using other people to feel good themselves. So they do favors for people. They are cheery. They bring over dinner for the sick. They people pleasing, all that stuff. But they're doing it so people will like them. How do you know? It's so easy to spot people pleasers. They're anxious all the time. They're anxious about what people are thinking of them. You can just see them are on edge. Whereas people who are genuinely serving are peaceful. They're giving from a place of abundance. People pleasers aren't. They're giving from a place of scarcity. They're anxious. They're nervous to do it right. And then if they don't get the recognition or the appreciation or the approval that they were hoping for, then guess what? They're very disappointed and feel victimized. That's why people pleasers always end up being victims, because they never quite get the reward that they were looking for. I talked to a lady once who was famous for just being the service capital of the Southeast. This lady ran every charity, and everybody referred to her as a saint. And I spent 3 minutes with her before she blew up like a volcano. Because I asked her, are people appreciative of all that you do for them? Oh, whoa. She turned into a monster right in front of my face. So this lady, who's been practicing real love, wrote about a business partner of hers who was taking a trip to another country with her for a business convention. So now she writes, we've known about this trip, me and my partner, for months, but he just waited around for me to arrange how we were getting to the airport. See what people do when they're around a people pleaser? They just let the people pleaser do everything for them. So he waited around for you to make the airport arrangements, because you always have. Then you say, he waited until the night before, and when I went to talk to him about it, he just said, oh, we'll figure it out in the morning. He's going to figure it out in the morning on the way to the airport, how he's going to get to the airport. Yeah, this is a great plan. You continue. And all he did in the morning was that he got ready and waited for me outside the house for me to make all the arrangements. Of course. Waiting for me to lead the way that's what I'm doing in the business for him. And that's what I've done in a lot of ways. So this is what I've been talking with you about with you before, that you interact with him and save him far too much. You take responsibility for him. You take his responsibility from him, and you do things to rescue him. You're teaching him in the business. You're his mentor, but you're not teaching him how to be more responsible, which means that he's going to be attached to you forever, like a child. He badly needs to learn responsibility, and you've acknowledged that. He waited for you to arrange airport transportation. That means you have not been clear in making him responsible in the past, or he wouldn't have done this. He wouldn't have done this if you hadn't already established a pattern of rescuing him. He wouldn't have done it with me. I would have just left without him if he hadn't made any arrangements and he hadn't talked to me. How am I supposed to know what he's going to do? So what could have happened? Days before the trip, you could have said, you can make arrangements, quote, you can make arrangements for both of us to get to the airport and communicate them to me sooner than 5 days from our departure. So you don't get to do it the night before. I need a report from you at least 5 days before we leave about all the arrangements you've made. This is how you teach somebody to be responsible. You don't talk about it. You give them assignments to fill. You don't learn responsibility by talking. You learn it from doing. Then you say, or if you don't do that, if you don't notify me within 5 days, and I'm not going to nag you between now and the 5 days, I'm notifying you now. Pay attention, everybody, because it applies to business partners. It applies to children, sometimes to spouses. That's a little stickier. So I'm telling you now that you have to notify me 5 days. No more notifications. If you don't do it by 5 days, and I actually give people a time. If you don't notify me by Tuesday at 3, I'm not joking, because without a deadline, you're really just playing around. So if you don't, I'll make my own arrangements to go to the airport. I'll get the taxi or the shuttle or whatever, and you will not be invited to come. You'll have to figure your own way out to the airport. And if you haven't, you might miss the flight and you'll miss the whole convention. I'll be darned. That's the price of not being responsible. This makes you responsible for something. This is still you talking to him. And I'm not making you make the arrangements. I'm just telling you, if you don't do it, I will make my own. See? We make it too complicated. Well, he's so irresponsible. Yeah, because you keep saving him. You created this crisis by not planning and by allowing him to be irresponsible. You caused it. You wanted to avoid a conflict by giving him an assignment. This is what we do. In the moment, we do the cheap thing, the easy thing. Well, I hate to have a conflict. I hate to see the expression on his face when I say, you've got to make arrangements for the airport, because almost certainly he'll frown because he's used to you rescuing him. So we avoid the short-term discomfort, and then we cause a long-term mess. People-pleasing and victimhood, yours, anybody else's, don't work very well. So you just need to see that you do it. I'm not telling you not to do it, but you asked, what could you do differently? I'm just telling you it doesn't work very well, and it never does. Never will. New subject. This is a man who is writing, and he's been practicing real love for a while. He's not new at it. Still angry, victim-y, miserable, not a good relationship with his wife or children. So when I say been practicing real love for a while, what I mean is playing at it, not really living it, or he wouldn't be experiencing all this. And then he learned more about real love, and somebody helped him see that doing what he's been doing in the past wasn't going to work, and he started to actually live it. Reading about it is nothing. Asking questions about it is nothing. It's doing it. Who would have thought? His relationship with his kids dramatically improved, like beyond what his wildest dreams. Recently, he told me about a conversation that he had with his daughter, his adult daughter, a conversation that lasted for 2 hours. And these days, he's having these 2-hour conversations with his kids regularly, whereas in the past, they couldn't talk 5 minutes without having a fight and somebody slamming the phone down. That would be different because he decided to live it. And at the end of the conversation, their conversation, she said this to him. Who would have thought that my dad would be bodhisattva? For those of you who aren't familiar with Buddhism, it means kind of like Buddha, a Buddha-like person moving toward that level of compassion and serenity. Who would have thought my dad would be like Buddha, a highly enlightened person? And then she said, I feel like I won the dad lottery. That just melts my heart. She feels like she won the lottery and got the world's best dad. This is a dad she used to fight with. I mean, these two used to beat each other up with rebar and hammers. So how cool is this? From a bad relationship, dad did what it took to learn to be loving and then to be loving, to practice it. And his daughter's life is completely different. Their relationship is different. His wife sits there as he's talking to me on Skype about this and just cries because he's so different. Sometimes I'll turn to her and I'll go, is he just putting me on, or is this really happening? Because you want to find out how he's doing, ask his wife. That's not always reliable, but she just sits there and cries and goes, he's really doing this. She just can't believe it. What's the message? If only people would keep going. Just not quit. Because the rewards are just infinite. Even though in the short term, sometimes the hurdles are pretty difficult. Parents, if the parents all over the world would investigate how to parent with real love a little, and then persist in it, the world would change. Really, it's the parents that are going to change the world. Articles about world leaders and laws and marches and Me Too and we've had enough. I don't remember. It's always hashtag something, and I can't ever remember what it is. It's school shootings and blah, 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 blah. And everybody has an opinion about gun control and we should do better reporting. But wrong. It's parenting. If a child is raised to be afraid or empty or angry, they're going to do all the stupid things that we see. School shootings become inevitable. I am only curious why there aren't more of them. And I think there are going to be an increasing rate of them because kids are going to realize, man, I can just walk into the school and just blow people up and shoot them. And they're doing it more and more. It's just another option. I'm in the process of writing a series about parenting, big series about parenting. We haven't come up with a title yet, but this is going to be like 20 hours of parenting instruction. It's going to be a lot more freewheeling and pointed than the Relevant Parenting book. This is where we're falling down most in the world. It doesn't matter who's the president of the United States. It doesn't matter who the president, premier, or whatever of China is. It matters whether we're being good parents. You want to change the world, be a parent, a real one. That will change the world. And now we can step off my soapbox. Next subject. A man with some experience with real love writes, sometimes I get faced with a situation where my partner asks me for something, and she really believes that it's good for her. Now, my first reaction is, you're being pretty vague. Your partner asks you for something. So pretty vague, which makes the question hard to answer specifically, but it's still potentially useful. So we're going to go with this, even though you're being vague. She could, for example, be asking for, I don't know, a new car, or to quit a job, or to go on a trip with friends in the past who are always a bad influence. Who knows what it is you're talking about specifically. You continue. She rationalizes that it's actually good for both of us. That's really clever. When somebody really wants something, they say, this will be good for you too, even though it won't be. You continue, but the request she makes feels unloving to me because it's clear she just wants to do this. And my feelings are not being truly considered. You're probably not off here. You're probably not wrong, because if she's convincing you that it will be good for both of you so she can do it, yeah, it's probably just going to benefit her. And probably not even that. She just wants to do it. Decisions really have to be made together in a couple. If her decision is going to affect you, you have an input. It matters. You ask, is the loving thing just to agree to her request, just to trust her? There's a lot of things to consider here. She's an adult, so she gets to have preferences, even those that might seem stupid to you. So she might say, from now on, for the rest of my life, I'm going to wear yellow. Well, she gets to have that preference. But let's say, for example, that she wants a significant sum of money to begin a business. I'm just making up an example because you were vague in the beginning, that you're nearly dead certain from your business experience will fail. Not might, has a 95% chance of failing because of whatever, lack of demand, her lack of business skills, much more. What do? Is giving in and giving her the money, or just devoting your joint money to this business venture, necessarily a loving thing to do? Or in order to be loving, do you necessarily have to give her the money? No. You have questions to ask. Am I being loving or am I just being enabling? Am I capable of giving this freely, or am I being obligated or guilted into doing this? If you're feeling guilty about this and you feel obligated, the answer is no. Really. If you're feeling obligated, no. Until you work at whether you can freely give her what she wants with this request or not. But with guilt, you're really not going to like the results either way. You have to consider whether any decision, this is another thing to think about in your question, whether any decision will detract from your capacity to love. Will it drain you? Will it genuinely add to your relationship, or is it just a distraction, like the failed business? I don't have the specifics, but you have to think about all that. If your answers indicate that you just can't agree, you have to say that. You don't just go, oh yes, because yes, that's the loving thing to do. No. You get to say, I'm not comfortable with this yet. I'll bring it up in a week or 2 weeks or whatever, but trust me that I'm not, this is you speaking to her. Trust me that I'm not being arbitrary. If I'm not comfortable with it, it would not be a good thing to just say yes. And this brings us back to one of the very few laws, not suggestions or principles, laws of a happy marriage. Before you do anything that affects both of you, pay attention. You both have to agree. I mean it. You break this law, you're going to be so sorry you did it, because you'll end up enabling, you'll end up draining yourself, she'll end up being an entitled victim. There's no win with an entitled victim. You're going to end up feeling used. You're going to be driven apart. Are you hearing this? All because you didn't ask those questions of yourself. You both have to agree. Sometimes Donna and I are making a decision about something, and just to remind ourselves, it's as simple as this. One of us will say, it doesn't matter who. I'm talking, so I get to say I say it. We're talking about going to a place, or taking a trip, or spending money, or it doesn't matter, changing the business in some way. And we're not to a place of agreement yet. And while we're not in a place of agreement yet, neither of us is pushing for our position. I might say to her, what is the name of this game we're playing? Or this decision we're making? Or this thing we're doing? What's the name of the game? And she'll say, you and me, baby. That's the name of the game. I don't mean game in like as in playing around. No, a game as in the game of life. In a couple, the name of the game is you and me. And if you do anything and make decisions or have attitudes or move in directions that don't put you and me first, you're really going to regret it. You and me, baby. Anything gets between you and me, everything falls apart. No kidding. A kid gets between you and me. A schedule gets between you and me. Money gets between you and me. No. So I suggest you consider that. It's very important. New subject. Years ago, I met a man who had a son and a daughter. The man was very unhappy because obviously he didn't have any love in his own life. He learned about real love and became much happier himself as he changed his judgments, his perspectives, and as he found love from other people, a subject that we've talked about many times, how you do that. He tried to share real love with his wife, who actually felt threatened by his attempts to be more loving and to find more love for himself. After all, he was changing the rules of their marriage. He was changing the rules by which they got together as a couple in the first place. There was no real love in the beginning, and now he's talking about this unconditional love foolishness. She's like threatened by that. Even though it's obviously a good thing to all the rest of us, having unconditional love, all she's hearing is new rules, changing the game, I'm going to be hurt. That's all she can hear, really. So she left him. He's becoming more loving. No kidding. I know him. And she left him because he was being more loving, because it was very unsettling to her. It scared her. He was happier, but she left. Insane, but not rare, because as he became happier, pay attention to this. This will apply to so many of you. As he became happier, he no longer complied, much like the guy who asked the question before this. He no longer complied with all the manipulation and controlling of his wife. That's all she knew. And she didn't like that. Get it? He changed the rules and he could no longer be manipulated. He wanted a real partner. And she's going, what is this partner foolishness? And she left him so that she could find somebody she could manipulate. Insane, but understandable. Really, I'm not making fun of her. They tried shared custody of their kids, which I almost would rather hear anything on a phone call or from an email than the words shared custody. It's the devil. It's just awful. It's a guaranteed battle. Goes badly. And eventually, both kids went with the mother, who did, and here's why. They were, early teenagers. And both kids just fought against the house rules, the loving and teaching that he was trying to do. And mom, who did everything for them, cleaned their rooms, made their beds, gave them candy, let them watch television, all that they wanted to, anything they demanded. So where do you think they went? They went to the fun house. They went to the carnival. They went to the circus. They went to the state fair because mom had no rules. Dad was trying to love and teach. Mom was simply trying to bribe them or please them or make them temporarily, gratified. Well, they fell for it. They fell for the bribe. And that's understandable. And he asked me, well, what should I do? The court order says I get half time. Well, that sounds good. It sounds like justice, but what are you going to do? Handcuff your kid to the bed while you love and teach them and make them stay with you and keep trying to teach them when they hate you, which they will if you try to love and teach them, when they have an alternative. So he just let them go. You're thinking, I could never do that. No. Okay, then handcuff them to the bed and let me know how that goes. So he let them go. But then, miraculously, the daughter, remember he had a son and a daughter, in her early teens, sensed that there was just something off in her mother's household. Something off with the way her mother lived. Something wrong with what she was being taught about life, that her mother would talk about how her father had victimized them all and was a terrible person and everything in life was unfair, and talked about victim stuff endlessly. And the daughter sensed that something was just wrong with this picture. Kids are very often smarter than we are about such things. What was missing was happiness. She saw that despite all of her mother's claims to be victimized, the bottom line is her mother wasn't happy. And she was realizing that she was becoming less happy while she lived with her mother, even though she was being bribed every day. She saw her mother wasn't happy, but her father was. This is very insightful stuff from an early teenage kid. Are you joking? Yeah, I'm getting everything I want, but mom's not happy, so how could mom teach me to be happy? That's brilliant. That's like a cocaine addict just suddenly going, I see that other people who are not using cocaine are happier. That's a rare thing for a cocaine addict to do. They usually have to hit bottom and go to jail before they realize what's going on, or have a child and realize they can't care for it and it has to be taken into foster care, or they put it in a dumpster, or that's usually what wakes up addicts. This kid woke up on her own. Amazing. So the daughter, Hannah, left her mother to live with her father, which is where she started off. Well, they were doing the shared thing. So she just left her mother's house and said, I'm going to live full-time with dad. Well, pretty hard for her mother to object since she'd gotten there in the first place by leaving dad. So how could she object when she's leaving mom? Although Mom did object and was going to have a court battle, and that didn't happen. It was difficult for this teenage kid, Hannah, in the beginning, learning this new way of living. At her mother's house, she didn't have to do a single thing. All of you parents, pay attention to this. All of you who are doing shared custody, who have stepkids, all of this applies to you. At the mother's house, she didn't have to do anything, and Dad couldn't do anything about it. She didn't have to do any cleaning, food preparation, no responsibilities. She was treated like an infant. And although there are certainly some pleasant aspects of that, being waited on hand and foot by a servant called Mom, she sensed that she wanted to be more than just pampered. She didn't want to be a child, because pampered isn't the same as being loved. Not even close. There's not a fine line. It's the Grand Canyon between them. Being loved involves real caring about her happiness, the girl, and that involves teaching her the principles of the course called, pause, life. School doesn't teach that course. Algebra and history, yeah. At home, we're supposed to be taught life. And we weren't taught life at home. Almost none of us were. Her dad was teaching her life, her mom, nothing. And she finally caught on to that. Mom was doing no essential teaching. So she went to live with Dad. After a year with her father, he wrote to me about Hannah. She said Hannah's now 16 and finished her school year with a perfect grade point average. Now, good grades alone mean very little. I can't count how many smart and accomplished people I know who are miserable, but let's keep reading what the dad's saying. He said, let me tell you how her morning went today, which is not unusual. She needed to get up early to go to the dentist and have a cavity filled. She got up on her own, which she always does. All you parents hearing this? This should actually start at about age 8. But anyway, she was doing it at 16. After she made the appointment on her own. So she was going to an appointment she made after finding out she had a cavity at her last checkup, the appointment for which she also made. See, the child is being taught to what? Be responsible. Remember the conversation we had earlier with the lady who had a business partner, and he didn't understand the first thing about responsibility, so he's going to lose his business. He's going to lose his mentor. This dad is teaching the 16-year-old responsibility, so that doesn't happen. So she doesn't sit outside the house and go, I wonder if a cab's just going to show up and take me to the airport so I can get to this conference. It's been my experience that people don't read your mind and supply your needs, unless, of course, you're Hannah's mother. How many kids are this responsible? Make their own appointment, get up and go, drive themselves to the dentist, do the whole thing. No adult hovering or controlling, just teaching how to live beforehand. He continues. After getting ready, she made herself breakfast. Listen to this. Parents think that they have a duty to make their children breakfast. They can feed themselves. She made herself breakfast. Then she did her dishes. And then in parentheses, he wrote, without being asked. When my children were at home, I used to say to them, I appreciate your doing whatever it was. And we had an acronym for it, WOBA, without being asked. If you have to be asked to do something that you know is your responsibility, frankly, it doesn't count, because you're not going to have somebody who's going to follow you around the rest of your life going, do this, do that. Did you remember to do this? Did you remember to do this? No, you'll just not do it, and life will just slap you silly. She got in her car, he continues, that she has created a budget for gas, maintenance, insurance, and drove herself to the appointment. She had the insurance information with her, and if there's a copay, she pays using her debit card, and then I reimburse her. Look at this. All of this is being done by her. She's learning responsibility. After school, she goes to a job she got for herself. She applied for it, interviewed, and was hired, all with minimal instruction and advice from me. At one point, she commented to me how easy, listen to this sentence, how easy the job interview seemed because the questions they asked her, pause, were about stuff that we'd already talked about in family meetings. You getting this now? You getting why I'm like, insanely enthusiastic about teaching more parenting. Because if we teach them to be responsible when they're 16, they don't have all these problems we read about. 16-year-olds who are loved never go to school and shoot people. Really? How come nobody's identified this? I just saw a documentary, and a lady who is Muslim decided to go into the Muslim community and find people who have previously been terrorists, and then who over the years have decided to, as in blown up people, shot them, gone to war in Afghanistan. I mean, real terrorists, the real deal. And she interviewed the people who were that and decided it was the wrong way to live. And boy, they just told her stuff she never would have imagined. She just sat there going, I can't believe I'm hearing this. And they said that these kids who do this, who become terrorists, are filled with anger at what? They're born with anger toward the West, to Europe, France, England, the United States. No, she says it's because they're raised in homes where they're controlled, belittled, criticized, and shamed. Well, you can't grow up and go kill your family because your entire culture, your entire community, your entire religion would come down on you and pretty much vaporize you. Wait a minute. Or I could vent my anger on the great Satan, whoever that is, whoever's handy. London, England, France, the US, pick a cause. She said it was because of the way they were raised. Because they felt isolated, because they felt demeaned, because they didn't feel worthwhile. Now, end of that particular rant, long parenthesis, and we go back to the father who's telling me about this kid who just does everything without being told. Woba. It's just cracking me up. The father learned to love and teach her, and that was what she needed in order to be happy and responsible. Not coddling, not nagging. Both coddling on one side, nagging on the other side. People say, I want to find the happy medium. No! There's no happy medium between those two. They're entirely on the wrong planet. No, it's loving and teaching. Loving and teaching isn't a compromise between nagging and coddling. It's a whole different thing. Game. Whole different rules. Whole different way of living. No yelling, no indulgence, no pampering. Kids often don't appreciate what they're hearing or learning in family meetings at the time. You're teaching them important life principles, and almost never in the family meeting will they say, oh, Father, it's so sweet of you to teach me this principle about responsibility. I mean, that just doesn't happen. And they couldn't possibly understand how the instructions will apply in future situations. But the effects of this family instruction in the course of life is huge in the present and in the future in ways they could not know. And it's our job to teach them important stuff, even though they may not know how it applies. You just tell them, this is what's required in order to be happy for the rest of your life. You just don't back off from that. He continues. If social events come up that she'd like to do, she puts them on a calendar, electronically shared with me. Then at the next family meeting, we just look over the calendar and go, is everything working? Yep. Oh, we need to change this, whatever. At the end of the day, she joins me for supper at 6 o'clock. And if that time changes for whatever reason, she texts me to say, I'll be a half hour late or whatever. All of this is responsibility without being told. After that, after dinner, she does whatever chores fall on this particular day for her because, they're up on the refrigerator or whatever. When she fails to do them, she takes responsibility and talks about them in a family meeting. Notice, there's no need, this is me talking now, for consequences if the child learns the lesson. So if a child doesn't do a task, it brings it up at the next family meeting and goes, I misprioritized things. I got tired. I went to bed. I didn't do the task yesterday, but I did do it today. Well, the child learned everything they needed to learn from that. What would you impose a consequence for? Consequences are for learning. And they did. Done. No consequence. He continues, later she'll decide what time she wants to go to bed. You don't tell a 16-year-old what time to go to bed, depending on how tired she's feeling and what she's planned for the next day, because she's learned if she doesn't get enough sleep, she feels cranky. Kill me dead. She decides. And why does a father let her do that? Because he taught her how to be responsible, and she is. So why would he have to nag her or control her? He doesn't. Every parent needs to hear this. If you love and teach them, and if they learn to feel loved and be loving and be responsible, they will be happy. And nagging and controlling and all that drama and victimhood just looks silly. It just doesn't happen. Finally, he concludes, when I got married and had children, this is how I pictured parenting could be. My anger and disappointment in the early years before real love guaranteed that it couldn't have happened. I need to look no further than my son and the damage I caused in his life and how he now knows nothing about responsibility. So he's taught his daughter, and he recognizes he didn't teach his son, so he lost his son to the ex, to his mother, where he's never going to learn it. Life may eventually teach him to be responsible, but life is just merciless. You don't show up to work on time, well, they just fire you. They don't take you under their arm and go, oh, you poor baby, you weren't taught responsibility at home, so I'll teach you. No, the boss goes, get out of here and get somebody who will do the job. It's way easier to learn it at home than I've met adults who are 40 and 50 years old, and they tell you how many jobs they were fired from in the last quarter. Like for the past 20 years, they've been doing this. And it's always their boss's fault, or the customers, or their coworkers, or their whatever, because they didn't have a father like this one. I said he concludes, but then I butted in. This time he's going to conclude. With love and teaching, I learned to be a great parent. I'm very lucky and blessed. No kidding. This is what is possible when parents learn how to love and teach. All of those horrific problems don't happen. Easier. New subject. Some fun observations from a person I've known for years. And when I wrote them down and included them here, that was a while ago, so you and I are going to find out why I called them fun right now. I don't remember what they are. This person writes, sometimes I've wondered about some of the things you've said to me. Well, no surprise there. I've wondered about some of the things I've said too. You continue, sometimes they didn't make sense. Sometimes I was offended. But you've been loving me now for years, and I have finally learned this. I can see that you really, she's talking about me when she says you, I can see that you really only prescribe one remedy for the disease of pain. Ooh, that's a nice metaphor, really. The disease of pain. How true. Then she continues. And that is always, always love. So it's the same medicine for all. Sometimes it may have a different flavor. Sometimes bigger doses are required for acute pain. Sometimes it comes with side effects that people don't like. This is a nice metaphor. Sometimes it needs to be administered intravenously. Sometimes with, this is me parenthetically adding, sometimes with a hammer. She does this even better because she's doing a medical metaphor. She says sometimes it needs to be injected straight into the heart, but sometimes on a spoon with sugar. But the medicine is always the same. Beautiful, beautiful metaphor. No comment from me, which is unusual. I'm just looking ahead. This is from a woman who has really done her work in eliminating fear and being happy, while many of the events and people around her have not changed. Welcome to life. If you want to change your life, you have to change you. You have to change your perspectives, your judgments, your feelings, your responses, your reactions, and learn to be happy and never count on the people around you changing with you or for you. And that happened to her. People around her didn't change. She was always a victim before and was always demanding, as victims do, like invariably, that's almost the definition of victimhood. She was always demanding that other people change themselves to suit her. That's it. Now she writes, driving to church this morning, I saw a police car ahead of me and I had a choice. Stay behind him or move to the next lane and drive beside him. Sounds like a small thing. I caught myself thinking, I'll stay behind so he won't see me. Yeah, because he wouldn't have a rear view mirror. I'm just laughing. But this is how we think. This is how we avoid pain. We hide ourselves. We think we're hiding ourselves. We avoid difficult situations. She continues, but I thought, wait a minute. I don't have anything to hide. This is an old thought based on an old fear of policemen. PTSD. This is me. It's literally insane how old experiences determine our judgments then, and our feelings and our behavior then, and they continue to control our feelings and behavior. Many of our judgments, perhaps most of them, come from events we don't even remember. She didn't have some negative experience with the police. She just had this irrational fear of them. Who knows where it came from? Somebody, when she was a little child, said, ooh, he's going to get in trouble when they saw a police car, something. Old fears are pretty persistent. She continues, I don't remember any negative experiences with the police, but I must have heard other people talk about them. Or maybe they said, if you don't behave, I'll have to call the police. That's a really good one, actually, come to think of it. I should have used that with my kids. Yeah, your fear had to come from someplace. Fears come from some judgment that you don't even remember learning, and trying to ferret out what the exact judgment or the event was is a waste of time. You just know it's from the past because it's disproportionate to the event in the present, or it's irrational. Your feelings are disproportionate, or your feelings are irrational. Poof, past, PTSD. We overanalyze. We want to find the cause. You're not going to, because you don't remember most of the things that caused it. Because the more we dig, the less we get. And the harder the digging gets. So quit digging. Just stick with what's true in the present. Am I loved and happy now? Yes. Then what am I worried about a cop for? You continue. For a few seconds, the fear was real. And until I saw it for what it was, which was completely irrational. And I decided to stop at the next red light next to the police car. Ooh. Telling myself how stupid and unnecessary this whole thing was. I was laughing as I eliminated this old fear. Do you hear this? We've talked about this many times. Event, judgment, feeling, reaction. She changed her judgment. She's not even sure where it came from. She's hypothesizing. Maybe it came from something somebody said. She just went, what's my judgment now? I got nothing to be afraid of. It doesn't make any sense to be afraid. After she really changed her judgment, she wasn't just playing. Her feeling of fear was gone, and her behavior changed, and she pulled up right next to the policeman. Now, it's such a small event, but no, they're all big events. Our lives are made of little small events, a whole bunch of them. Mountains are made of trillions of small molecules, just like our lives. And we don't remember how many of the building blocks got there. Well, then change the mountain. You continue. I realize that possibly our past mindset and fears will always occasionally try to catch up with this. Is that inevitable? Oh, yeah, the past is persistent. It just lies there waiting to sneak in the door like a neighborhood cat. You say it's fun to uncover my fears, slowly but surely. Yeah, no kidding. And necessary. uncover them, change the judgment, and get rid of them. If our feelings and behaviors are largely determined by old judgments created by events we don't even remember, then we spend our entire lives just reacting, like billiard balls being hit. And that's sad because we're not making choices. We're just reacting mindlessly to old pain and fear. We can change all of it. And you're proof of that. I know a great many people, thousands of people who have changed their judgments and changed their lives. And if they can, you can. It works. We'll see you next week.